Okay, well, today on the Brett Allen Show, we're chatting with actor and storyteller Greg Allan Martin. So excited about this conversation. He is part of a great series called Shadrach, where he plays Papa, which is a great family faith-based original series. Affirm Originals. It's so good. And then, of course, other projects as well. You've been very busy this summer, and I'm so glad we were able to meet. Thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you and chat with you today. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Brad. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the series. It's so good. And you have been a part of this series. It's a really good story. I'm always interested to know when, as an actor, when you get approached to do something or to be a part of something, like what is the drive or the impetus to participate? Because it sometimes is a paradox of choice to decide where you want to commit your time if you have a family or if you're busy with other things as well.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it actually comes down to a couple of things. And the first thing is always the writing.
Yeah.
Whenever I get an audition, that's the first thing that strikes me, one way or the other. I have certainly had auditions where I've literally called back my agent and said, this is just not well written at all. I don't want to, I don't want to be a part of this. And then you have other things where you look at it and you go, wow, this is some great writing. So when Shadrach came around, I noticed that it was just so beautifully written. And the other thing aside from the writing is just what the story is, what it's about. And this one just really spoke to my heart because of the values, because of the family aspect of it, just a sweet, affirming, uplifting show. And I just thought, this is something I would love to be a part of.
Yeah, I would say so. It's just really good. And the thing I like is you can watch it with your family and don't have to, there's other shows that we've covered like Blue Ridge and a few others where, you're not having to reach for the mute button necessarily
Absolutely.
or wonder, where the story is going to go and get caught off guard as a parent. Um,
Exactly.
again, it comes down to the writing, which I think you can have great actors, but if the writing is not there, it just makes it a challenge. But it
Yeah.
also works in the reverse.
Yeah.
So, do you? How much do you read ahead before you make that decision? Do you read all of it, or you're like, I need to see this amount before I can really commit to it and sort of understand your character and arc?
Well, it differs depending upon the project and how the particular production company or producers and directors set up the audition process. Usually, for an audition, you just get one or two scenes, and that gives you a pretty good idea. I mean, as an actor, I've done a lot of stuff on stage, and one of the things I love about great writing is it just flows so naturally. It's even easy to remember because the writing is so good. And there are times when you'll get something, even in a two-page scene, where you go, this is just hard to learn because it's just so awkward. But in a case like this, you get a couple of scenes and that gives you a really good flavor of it. Oftentimes, when you get a call back, you'll get a chance to see the entire script. This was 6 episodes, so I had a chance to at least read one entire episode, and I went, okay, this really has a special quality to it.
Yeah, it's really good. So, for those who haven't watched, can you just fill us in on what they can expect, Greg, and your character, who's obviously very pivotal to driving the story and stuff like that?
Sure, sure. And let me just start by saying, by echoing something you just said. It sounds cliche to say it, but we say this a lot. This really is good for the whole family.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a great anecdote about that. Shortly after the show aired, I got an email from a high school classmate of mine that I hadn't seen since a reunion a few years prior. And she said, I just wanted you to know we watched the entire series and we watched it with our grandchildren
Oh, wow.
and we all loved it. And I actually copied that email, sent it to the executive producer, and said, you can't get a much better review than this in terms of how universal this is for every generation." But to more
That's
specifically,
cool.
Yeah, to more specifically answer your question, the story basically, and this is not giving anything away because you find this out in the first 5 minutes. There are parents who live in the big city with their two kids, a 12-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, and the father has just lost his job. Basically,
Mm.
his brother-in-law kind of stole some money from the company, so he's lost his job, lost his company, and they are forced because now they've lost everything. They have no means of income. They are forced to move from their big penthouse in the big city to live with the grandparents on their farm. And I'm playing Paw Paw, and uh, you can imagine how what the upheaval is in this, especially for these kids. A 12-year-old girl who's pretty and popular, and she's involved in so many things in her junior high, and all of a sudden they're yanked out of that and moved to the country. And even in one of the first scenes, she gets out of the car and holds up her cell phone and goes, "There's no cell service." So it's all about change, which we all go through, and change is hard. But all of a sudden, there are three generations that are thrown together in one household. Dad's lost his job. Mom is moving back to the city where she grew up, feeling kind of like a failure. Kids are now out of their element. And the grandparents who've been living in this nice, easy life on their farm now have their kids, their grandchildren all living under the same roof. So it's about how do you deal with that kind of change, and how do you embrace not just surviving this, but actually thriving on it and learning. The grandparents get to mentor the young kids. The kids get to learn from the grandparents. Everybody, and it's not just that this is a preachy kind of show. There's a lot of heart in it. There's a lot of humor in it. And what happens is that the young girl, the 12-year-old girl, she bonds, and I won't go into how this happens, she bonds with a horse. And that's the name of the show, is Shadrach. She names the horse Shadrach. And it's about how she learns to, instead of being so focused on social media, now she gets to bond with this horse. She gets to appreciate the simple life and more simple values. And so it's all about going through change and embracing a new and different way of life that turns out to be wonderful for all of them.
Yeah, I love that piece about the kids being removed from social media and the technology aspect of it. And
Yeah.
being a dad myself and having a kid who's 10 and is
Ah,
has been raised in this world of technology, and it's only going to get more intense as he gets older. But uh, having the understanding that there are more things to life than just what the world or the media has to offer. Well, it's really good. And I think people will enjoy it when they get a chance to watch if they haven't already. You mentioned you have a stage background and a theater background. Um, how do you view those two worlds? Because one is obviously more different than the other. There's no breaks, there's no cut, it's just you. Is that where it's safe to say where you've really learned the most about acting is being on stage, or has it been a culmination of both?
sure, absolutely. And I think most actors would agree with that. That's where the greatest learning and development as an actor comes from, being on stage. And it's probably the most fun to do. I mean, it's not as financially rewarding as film and
Yeah,
TV,
I was gonna
but
say.
I grew up as an athlete, and I played all kinds of sports when I was a kid. And I did a little bit of theater here and there. And then, without going into too great a detail for my background, I have not been a professional actor my entire life. And in fact, just recently have I been able to devote full time to it because I played football in college. I went on to law school. Then I worked as a district attorney in Los Angeles County for almost 3 decades. Now,
Yeah.
during that time, I was part of a theater group, and I was able to do probably 25 plays with them during the time when I was a DA. And I always joked that the reason I would feel the need after being a trial attorney during the day to go do theater at night was just that an audience of only 12 people at a time was not enough for my ego. So uh, the theater to me, I mentioned the athletics because to me, the theater was the closest thing to that. In sports and in theater, the whistle blows or the curtain goes up, you got to be on and you got to perform. And there is an adrenaline rush to that. There's an excitement to that. And there is a response, an immediate response that you get from an audience. If it's comedy, they're laughing. And if it's an intense drama, you can tell the reaction just from the utter silence in the theater. And
Yeah.
most of the theater I did was a very small, intimate theater, which I loved. So yeah, theater is the best training ground, no doubt.
Do you miss life as a DA in LA? I mean, that's I know it's kind of a different question, but I'm very
Yeah.
curious because knowing your background and some of the trials that you were a part of, I mean, or is that just a life that's removed, at this point?
Well, I could spend a lot of time answering that question
I'm
off that,
sure.
Mr. Glaber. But yes and no. I miss being involved in criminal law. I felt like what I was doing was really important. And I certainly enjoyed my time as a DA there. But this is not why I retired. I retired a couple of years ago. I didn't retire because of what was going on in our office. But without getting too political here, we had a new DA come in, George Gascon,
Oh
who
yeah.
I and most every other DA I know did not appreciate his approach at all. And what happened with crime in Los Angeles County, and it happened with crime in a lot of cities across the country with this so-called progressive movement within prosecutors' offices. Now the tide is turning. They voted George Gascon out of office. They've reversed some of the policies that even came in before he came into office about decriminalizing certain thefts and other crimes. So it's really turned back around. But to answer your question, I left at a time where I was glad to get out of there because it had become sort of a dispiriting place to work.
Yeah,
But at the
especially
same
now
time,
it's in the news a lot,
yeah,
given
yeah,
the uh Menendez brothers trial and that
yeah,
whole deal. So, but that's a whole nother conversation.
it
Well,
is.
thank
Yes.
you for your time, Greg. I hope people get a chance to watch Shadrach. Can you just remind our listeners and viewers where they can watch?
Yeah, it's streaming on Great American Pure Flix. So you can do two things. You can either just go right to pureflix.com and search for Shadrach, and that's Shadrach. Or you can actually go to Amazon Prime and in the search bar, just put for Prime Video, just put Shadrach series and it will come up. And that will actually take you to a page to where you can click on and you can get a free 7-day subscription to Great American Pure Flix and check it out. It's very easy to find.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure and congratulations on your success on this and all the other things you've been a part of. I appreciate your time, my friend.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.